I'm supposed to fly to the Philippines today, but Sheena did some hardcore breakup level stuff.
How could you do this to him, to our family? You on my son, you on your whole relationship, you on any love he had for you. There is no excuse.
Sheena's heart was racing as she boarded the plane, clutching her passport and the few savings she had managed to put aside over the years. She had worked hard, saved every peso she could spare, and even though part of that money went to help her family, she had hoped it would also show Forrest she was serious about building a future together. Instead, she had no idea that the moment she stepped off the plane, she would be stepping straight into a storm. Forrest was fuming. His texts had been sharp, full of accusations, and his mom's messages were even worse. She had never seen anger like that directed at her before, and it was all over money she had earned herself. As the airport doors slid open, Sheena scanned the crowd, spotting Forrest and his mom, Molly, waiting. The excitement she had felt for weeks started to tangle with a knot of anxiety. She remembered the warnings from friends about overbearing family members, but nothing could prepare her for the intensity of Forrest's glare and Molly's icy stare. She tried to smile, to appear calm, but inside, she was second-guessing everything. Was this how her life in America would start? With threats, accusations, and tension the second she arrived, Forrest barely glanced at her, his focus on the text threads he had been obsessively rereading. His frustration wasn't subtle. "This is not how we plan things," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Molly to hear. Sheena swallowed hard, realizing this wasn't just a disagreement. This was a full-blown confrontation waiting to happen. She had flown thousands of miles for a man she loved, and now it felt like every expectation she had built in her mind was about to crash into reality. Her excitement clashed with the storm she was walking into. Every step toward them felt heavier than the last, and a single question loomed over her mind. Could this trip survive its very first moment? The moment Sheena's phone buzzed, her stomach sank. Molly's messages were ruthless, demanding, impossible to ignore. Words like harlot and lying jumped off the screen, each sentence sharper than the last. Sheena stared at them, trying to process the audacity. This was her money, her effort, her choice. And yet, here was Forrest's mom treating it like a crime. Sheena's mind raced. How could someone so eager to meet her turn this quickly into an interrogation? Across from her, Forrest barely noticed the tension. He was standing tall, acting like a hero, ready to rescue Sheena from her own family. In reality, he wasn't working. He wasn't contributing financially, yet he was issuing ultimatums as if he were saving the day. Every word he muttered was wrapped in a sense of entitlement, a quiet assumption that his position gave him authority over Sheena's decisions. He hadn't even acknowledged her efforts or sacrifices. Instead, he seemed convinced that his moral compass and his anger were enough to dictate how she should live her life. Sheena tried to smile again, to keep the mood light, but each glance at Forrest made her wonder whether she had misjudged him entirely. Was he really on her side, or was he more interested in appeasing his mother? The weight of the texts, the constant glare from Forrest, the silent judgment in every movement, it all pressed down on her. She felt trapped between her excitement to finally meet the man she loved and the overwhelming pressure from his family and his sense of entitlement. Her mind kept circling back to one impossible question. Would Forrest actually stand up for her, the woman who had crossed oceans to be with him? Or would he let his mother's fury dictate their entire trip? Every second felt like a countdown, and Sheena realized the answer would shape everything that came next. Before the tension at the airport could fully settle, Sheena and Forrest found a small pocket of calm, if only for a moment. They decided to do a quick workout together, following a video on their phones, each trying to match the other's pace. It was awkward at first, Forrest stumbling over the exercises, Sheena giggling at his missteps, but slowly, laughter began to replace the weight of their arguments. For a few minutes, it almost felt like they were teenagers on a carefree holiday rather than adults caught in a storm of money fights and family pressure. Sheena admitted to the camera how nervous she was about finally meeting him, how she had imagined this moment for months, and yet part of her feared that reality wouldn't match the dream. She wanted so badly for this trip to be perfect, for the excitement she had built in her mind to be met with warmth and genuine affection. And in that little workout session, with sweat and laughter mingling, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Forrest could be the person she thought he was. Yet, Underneath the smiles and stretching, subtle reminders of Forrest's past flickered in the background. Sheena had heard whispers about his relationship in Indonesia, how heartbreak and betrayal had left him guarded, suspicious, and perhaps a little too quick to judge. Every playful push, every teasing comment carried the weight of unspoken history, a past he hadn't fully shared but that influenced every move he made now. The workout ended, and they collapsed on the floor, laughing but exhausted, a brief reprieve from the storm they knew awaited them. Sheena's excitement was palpable, but so was a creeping anxiety. She had crossed oceans to be here, to start something real. Yet the shadow of money disputes and family interference loomed over them. For all the warmth they had just shared, one thought lingered uncomfortably in her mind. Could this fragile bonding survive the fire that was waiting for them? As the plane climbed into the clouds, Forrest leaned back in his seat, staring blankly out the window. His mind was a storm of what-ifs. Memories of Indonesia flickered uninvited across his thoughts. The girl who had taken his trust, drained his hope, and left him wary of giving his heart fully. He replayed every past mistake, every betrayal, trying to anticipate how this trip could go wrong before it even began. Each thought made him tighten his grip on his wallet, on his sense of control, and on the belief that he had to protect himself at all costs. Meanwhile, Sheena was on a different flight, her own mind spinning with anticipation and dread. She pictured the moment she would finally see Forrest in person. The first hug, the first smile, maybe even the first touch. But she couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at her. His mother's messages, Forrest's earlier frustration, the weight of expectations she hadn't signed up for, all of it pressed on her chest. She imagined every possible scenario, from awkward silences at the airport to arguments erupting mid-trip, wondering if the excitement she felt would survive the reality she was about to face. Every mile brought them closer, but also deeper into anxiety. Forrest's fears of being hurt again collided with Sheena's worries about approval and control. The plane became more than just a mode of travel. It was a mental battlefield, with each of them silently rehearsing conversations, bracing for judgment, and questioning if the dream of being together could withstand the tension waiting on the other side. The hours passed, and with every landing, the stakes grew higher. Sheena adjusted her bag nervously, trying to calm herself, while Forrest ran through contingency plans in his head. Both knew that the real challenge wasn't the flight, it was what awaited them when they finally faced each other. Will all the money fights ruin their first face-to-face? The moment Sheena stepped off the jet bridge, the airport felt smaller, more intense, as if every gaze was magnifying the tension. There stood Forrest, rigid, arms crossed, his jaw tight, and beside him, Molly, radiating the kind of authority that made the air itself feel heavy. Sheena forced a smile, tried to breathe through the panic fluttering in her chest. But the first words out of Molly's mouth hit like thunder. Comments about money, loyalty, and respect spilled over, sharp and deliberate, leaving Sheena scrambling for footing. Sheena's calm became her shield. She answered politely, measured, careful not to escalate, yet refusing to apologize for decisions that were hers alone. Every response from her was a subtle pushback against the judgment and entitlement pressing down from both Forrest and his mother. Molly's tone grew colder, her questions laced with accusation, but Sheena's demeanor contrasted perfectly, patient, steady, refusing to take the bait. It was a battle of wills played out in seconds, eyes locked, words carefully chosen, and intentions laid bare without a single dramatic outburst. Forrest's posture shifted constantly, revealing the tug-of-war in his mind. Part of him wanted to appease his mother, to nod along and assert that Sheena had overstepped, to validate Molly's outrage. Yet another part was quiet, watching Sheena, noticing her restraint, her courage in the face of verbal assault, and realizing the stark difference between misplaced anger and genuine intent. Behaviorally, it was a textbook display of entitlement and control. Molly's fury wasn't about the money itself, it was about asserting dominance, reclaiming influence, and demanding that her son's partner conform to her rules. Forrest's challenge was to navigate loyalty, love, and maternal pressure simultaneously, a position fraught with invisible consequences. Sheena's heart raced with one question, louder than any words exchanged. Would Forrest side with his mother, or finally stand beside her, the woman who had crossed oceans to be here? The argument ignited the moment they left the airport, spilling into the car where tensions could no longer hide behind polite smiles. Forrest's frustration boiled over, focused entirely on the money Sheena had sent to her family. He painted it as betrayal, as if her helping her own loved ones was a personal attack on him and their future. Each sentence dripped with entitlement, as though the years she spent working and saving meant nothing compared to his expectations. Sheena sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap, trying to maintain composure. This was her money, her choice, and yet she was being accused of sabotage. Her independence, the very thing that had allowed her to make this trip possible, was being questioned in real time. She tried to reason, to explain that helping her family didn't diminish her commitment to Forrest, but every word seemed to fuel his anger rather than soothe it. Psychologically, it was a minefield. Forrest's insecurity over past heartbreaks clashed with an inflated sense of control, creating a cocktail of mistrust and judgment. He couldn't separate his fear of being scammed from the reality in front of him. Sheena had crossed oceans to be with him, and her actions were motivated by loyalty and care, not deceit. Sheena's feelings of being controlled and judged, meanwhile, added layers of stress and doubt. Could she ever truly feel safe showing affection or planning a future when her choices were constantly scrutinized? Every mile in the car felt like a countdown, each breath tighter than the last. Forrest's mother remained a looming presence, her approval still a silent weapon in the background. Sheena's thoughts spun in circles, wondering if independence could survive in a relationship so dominated by entitlement. With tension this high, every glance, every word, carried the weight of a test she hadn't asked for. Can this relationship survive financial judgment, or is it already cracking under the pressure? After hours of tense silence, Forrest tried to shift gears, reaching for a small bridge over the widening gap between them. A soft compliment here, a hesitant hug there, gestures designed to remind Sheena he wasn't completely lost in his frustration. Each attempt was careful, almost measured, as if he feared overstepping yet wanted to show he still cared. Sheena noticed, her chest tightening with conflicting emotions, relief that the hostility was easing, but fear that it was temporary, that any warmth could evaporate in a second. Sheena clung to the hope of connection, replaying his gestures in her mind, searching for authenticity. She wanted to believe in the man she had fallen for online, the man whose messages had promised excitement, support, and partnership. Yet her experiences, past betrayals, Forrest's controlling streak, and Molly's relentless judgment kept her on edge. She couldn't help analyzing every movement, every word, wondering if this was genuine affection or just a performance to calm the storm. Psychologically, this moment reflected a common pattern. When someone shows love or affection, it can blur the line between healthy partnership and control. People often excuse controlling or entitled behavior when they believe the person cares deeply, when small gestures of intimacy are interpreted as proof of love. Sheena, like many in her position, was balancing hope against skepticism, desire against self-preservation. Forrest seemed aware of the delicate balance, alternating between assertiveness and tenderness, trying to regain her trust without conceding his need for control. Sheena responded cautiously, allowing small smiles and tentative laughter, testing the waters while keeping a mental shield up. For a fleeting moment, there was connection. Yet the question lingered in the air, heavy and unspoken. Will Forrest finally treat Sheena like an equal, respecting her choices and independence? Or will she remain a dependent in a relationship shadowed by judgment and entitlement? As the car weaved through traffic, Molly's presence remained palpable, even in silence. Every glance, every sigh carried unspoken critique. She questioned Sheena's choices, her priorities, even the way she spoke, as though control could be exerted without words. Forrest occasionally tried to mediate, but the tug-of-war between his mother's entitlement and Sheena's calm reasoning was relentless. Sheena, aware of the storm she had entered, held herself with quiet poise, explaining her decisions without defensiveness, showing a level of emotional intelligence that seemed to only irritate Molly more. This clash was more than personality. It was a study in behavior. Molly's insistence on control revealed entitlement rooted in fear, an urge to dictate outcomes she didn't fully understand. Sheena's measured responses, by contrast, reflected autonomy, patience, and the ability to consider multiple perspectives without losing herself. Every interaction highlighted the imbalance. One party attempting dominance through judgment, the other demonstrating resilience through reasoning. Psychologically, moments like this illustrate why some relationships strain under parental influence. People often defer to ego, tradition, or fear, mistaking authority for guidance, while others push back with rationality, creating inevitable conflict. The emotional weight on Sheena was heavy. She had crossed oceans for love, yet had to navigate power dynamics that weren't hers to bear. Every comment from Molly, every cautious smile from Forrest amplified the tension. Sheena's thoughts turned to what awaited her. Meeting Forrest's parents had been one challenge, but how would this dynamic shift when she and Forrest faced her own family or openly discussed money? Could the reasoning, patience, and empathy she brought to the table survive such pressure? Or would Molly's ego continue to dictate the narrative? The answers weren't clear, and the stakes kept rising. Empathy and calm reasoning were on one side, ego and entitlement on the other. Which would dominate when these worlds collided? Night had fallen, but the tension hadn't eased. Forrest sat quietly, staring at the city lights outside the car window, replaying memories that refused to fade. His past heartbreak in Indonesia, the sting of being scammed and abandoned, lingered like a shadow, influencing every thought, every reaction. Could he trust again? Could he let someone in without fear of being hurt? Or worse, being taken advantage of? The weight of these questions pressed on him as heavily as Molly's judgment had all day. Inside, Sheena wrestled with her own revelations. Crossing oceans to meet the person she cared about had been an act of faith, of courage. Yet now she was faced with the stark reality. The balance of power in this relationship was tilted, and not in her favor. Every financial critique, every subtle manipulation, reminded her that independence and love were clashing in ways she hadn't anticipated. She felt herself pulled between desire to connect and instinct to protect her own agency. Dialogue flickered in her mind. The dismissive comments, the subtle threats, the attempts at charm, and Sheena realized she had choices to make. Could she tolerate the constant scrutiny, the conditional support, the implied dependence? Or was it time to assert herself, to set boundaries that might shake the foundations of this romance? Psychologically, moments like this are where love tests endurance. Fear, history, and external pressures often cloud judgment, and the mind instinctively seeks patterns. Forrest's trauma and Sheena's independence collided in ways that could either break or solidify trust. The car's silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken decisions. Could love truly survive the intertwined battles of money, motherly interference, and lingering mistrust? Every glance, every word now carried the weight of choice, and neither could escape the reckoning that was coming. By the time the evening settled, the storm had softened, though not disappeared. Forrest made small, deliberate efforts to bridge the gap, offering quiet apologies for his earlier rigidity, complimenting Sheena sincerely, even letting a hug linger just a moment longer than necessary. Sheena responded cautiously, allowing herself to feel the warmth without letting go of her self-respect. It was a fragile balance, but for now, it worked. The tension didn't vanish entirely. Molly's presence loomed in every thought, her disapproval a subtle but persistent undercurrent. Yet, for the first time, Forrest seemed willing to mediate rather than surrender entirely to her judgment. The power dynamics hadn't disappeared, but a temporary truce had formed, built on mutual acknowledgement of feelings and effort to respect each other's choices. For viewers, the takeaway is clear. Relationships are not just about love. They are negotiations of boundaries, trust, and respect. Money and parental interference can become flashpoints, but recognizing entitlement versus reasoned independence allows couples to navigate conflicts more effectively. Emotional intelligence, calm reasoning, and small gestures of empathy can prevent disagreements from becoming irreparable, even in high-pressure, cross-cultural situations. Sheena and Forrest's night ended with tentative smiles, a quiet dinner, and small, meaningful moments that hinted at possibility. But the larger challenges remained: how to balance family expectations, personal autonomy, and romantic commitment in the long term. The reconciliation was real, yet tentative, leaving a lingering question. Would this fragile peace endure? Or would old patterns reassert themselves once the cameras stopped rolling? Their story was far from over, and the next chapter promised even higher stakes. As viewers, we're left on the edge, wondering how the next confrontation, whether with money, loyalty, or meddling family, will unfold. Sheena and Forrest might have survived this encounter, but will their love withstand the pressure of all that lies ahead? The answers will only come in the next chapter of Reality Drama Files.